Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Brittany. No intro needed for this video, basically because I'm going to jump right back into where we left off in part 1. If you aren't aware, this video is part 2 of our happy birthday chocolate puzzle project. If you haven't seen the first video yet, go watch that first. Check it out in this card or linked in the description below. Okay, let's get going. So, for editing purposes, I thought that it would be easier to show each step of this process in order. So that's what I did in the previous video. But I also just wanted to explain in a little more detail the order of events at this step. Because in reality, I had a total of 6 sheet trays with the acetate designs on them and 1 bowl of tempered white chocolate. But I didn't spread white chocolate on all 6 trays and then after cut all 6 trays, because this part of the process where you spread the chocolate and then cut out the chocolate pieces is all about timing. So really the most sheets that I ever usually spread at a time is 3. So what I actually did here was I tempered, I think about 2 pounds of white chocolate with the seeding method in a bowl. Then I covered 3 of the sheet trays with white chocolate. I like to start with the easy ones first, so like the side pieces, the plain ones, so that, you know, just getting into the flow of things. So basically by the time I spread chocolate over the 3rd sheet tray, the 1st sheet tray was ready to cut. When you cut the pieces, the chocolate needs to be set enough that it isn't tacky and won't stick to your ruler or squish underneath it, but also not getting super set up that it's really hard to cut through or even starts cracking when you try to cut it. Like I mentioned before, when flat chocolate contracts, it will curve up as it pulls away from the acetate. So I just grab anything flat I have lying around and then usually weigh it down with butter because it's heavy enough, but not too heavy that it'll cause damage. Then I put the pieces in the fridge for around 20 minutes. Yeah, so just to clarify my order of operations here, I tempered 2 pounds of white chocolate, created 3 sheet trays of pieces by spreading the chocolate, cutting the chocolate, and then putting them in the fridge. Because of timing all that and cutting all the pieces and moving them into the fridge, my tempered chocolate in my bowl is now starting to cool down. So that's the tempered white chocolate that I used to put in my piping bag and patch my image pieces, the cracks on the cocoa butter. Yeah. So then while my crack patches were setting up, I tempered a fresh batch of white chocolate, about 2 pounds again, using the seeding method in the same bowl. Now, while my tempered white chocolate was cooling to working temperature, I just quickly grabbed the 3 sheet trays out of the fridge and pulled all the pieces off of the acetate, set them aside on a piece of parchment paper and sheet tray. And then my second batch of chocolate was ready to use, so I covered the last 3 sheets of pieces, but this time I did 2 sheets and got them cut and into the fridge. And I saved the puzzle for last because it was going to be tricky and I needed to have full focus on the timing of it. Sorry, I know that's all confusing, which is why I've been struggling to edit it. I think it would have been a huge mess if I tried to edit it in actual order, but I figured I would just quickly explain it to you guys because I think it's nice to know the actual timing of things behind the scenes. I know that some of you are interested in workflow, so I wanted to include as much as I could. I also wanted to explain the fact that you wouldn't want to cover all 6 sheet trays in a row with chocolate because by the time you were finished covering the last one and you go to cut the first one, it would probably be too firm to cut and it could cause damage and break or crack. And some of you might also be wondering why I spent the time tempering 2 batches of chocolate rather than just keeping the first batch in temper. And honestly, you could just temper chocolate one time and keep it in temper as you work. But there was just a lot going on in the kitchen, and sometimes I just don't want to be in a rush or have the anxiety of like checking the chocolate, running over here, grabbing the heat gun, checking the things in the fridge, cutting the pieces. I'm telling you, I was stressed about cutting out the puzzle, so I just wanted to like work calmly and slowly. So that's why I was just like, I'll just temper another batch of white chocolate, no problem. Wherever you can, it's nice to avoid the chocolate anxiety because that's when you make dumb mistakes like tip over your cocoa butter or kick the water filter off of your airbrush and snap it in half like I did last night. Okay, so for the puzzle, I created this thin little puzzle strip template. I just drew it up myself. And I created this out of thin cardboard before I did the next step. So I spread the tempered white chocolate over top of the puzzle image, the same as all the rest of the sheets. Because this is going to take a lot longer to cut out, I'm watching the sheet like a hawk so that literally as soon as the chocolate is firm enough, I start cutting it. And I used this little knife tool rather than a paring knife because it's a little easier to control directionally with. So yeah, I mapped out my puzzle to have 6 rows. So I just follow my cardboard template as I move it along each row. And then the other direction for 6 columns. I flip it a couple times on the other side just to add variety. Keep in mind that my puzzle shapes don't curve too much in and out to lock into each other too much. And I avoided that because 1, those types of pieces would be a lot harder to cut out, and 2, that type of shape would be much more fragile in chocolate and easier to break when pulling the pieces apart or putting them back together. Anyway, the timing was nearly perfect because by the time I got to the last row, the chocolate was getting much harder to cut through. So the last 2 sheets of puzzle box pieces were in the fridge along with the puzzle for about 20 minutes. And then the fun part is always peeling up your chocolate to see what all your hard work looks like. For the puzzle, I flipped it over because I wanted it to stay intact so that I could easily see how it turned out. One thing I want to mention, and that you also might notice, is some cocoa butter chipping around where I cut the curved pieces. I wasn't at all surprised by this. That can definitely happen because you're cutting through crystallized cocoa butter essentially, so you do run that risk. But honestly, the chipping wasn't too bad, and so I was overall happy with how it turned out. All right, we finally, this has been a long journey, made it to the last step, which is assembling the box. To assist me with this, I have a heat plate, which I originally bought to keep cocoa butters in temper, but I have found for me it doesn't work that great because it always gets too hot. And then once it heats up, it turns off and then it cools down. So then your cocoa butters cool down and then it heats up and then it gets them too hot. So now I just use it for gluing chocolate things together like hot cocoa bombs or making boxes. But if you don't have a heat plate, you can just warm up a sheet tray in the oven. I usually do around 190 degrees Fahrenheit, and you just pop it in there until, I don't know, 10 minutes until it's warm, and then you can use that instead of the heat plate. So I'm going to assemble the inside bottom of the puzzle box first. So the first step is that I need to melt down all the edges that I will be attaching together. All the chocolate piece edges are 90 degrees, so it helps to melt just the tiniest bit off to get rid of that corner so that the pieces fit right together in order to minimize gaps. I glue the bottom of the box onto an acrylic plate so that the whole thing will be easy to lift and transport without constantly handling it. For the side pieces, I only melt each small edge now, and I'll melt the longer edge right before attaching. Here's a little tip: if your hands get really warm while you're working and you don't want to melt the chocolate pieces, grab an ice pack and hold it for a while to cool them down. Just be sure to wipe off any moisture before picking up the chocolate again. So now I melt the long edge of the first side and carefully place it onto the base of the box. The melted chocolate off of that corner acts as glue. The quicker you can get it adjusted and then just leave it alone and stop touching it, the better. As soon as it's stable, you can carefully pipe some supporting chocolate glue along the seam. This is tempered white chocolate left over from my second tempered batch. So yeah, basically this step takes time and patience and a gentle hand. A couple tips are that if the lengths aren't quite right, you can melt them down a tiny bit shorter if you need to. If you're having trouble with your chocolate taking too long to set up, you can use Magic Freeze Spray. I bought mine from the Sweet Shop by Amari Gashon. But I actually found a couple times that I used it and blew my chocolate wall right over. So use at your own risk. Another thing that you can do is set a glove box up against the piece to hold it in place as it sets. And last, the pieces vary and sometimes still have a slight curve even though you weigh them down in the fridge, so just know that things aren't going to be flawless, and that's okay. Now I work on the puzzle box top. So first step is to melt off the corners, and then I just do the same exact thing I did with the base of the box. You don't have to do this next step, but on the puzzle box base, I wanted to add just a little piping to hide the seams. So I just did a little pearl border along each edge. And it wasn't my cleanest piping, but it turned out okay. The top edge I wanted to be a bit prettier because you'll see it the most. The inside corners would mostly be hidden by puzzle pieces. The top of the puzzle box needed to be really sturdy because it would be handled the most as we put the lid on and off. But the corner glue couldn't be too thick or else it could block the lid from sliding onto the base. So I piped some extra chocolate glue in each corner, but then I smoothed it out and spread it with a rounded decorating tool. And then I piped a hefty seam on each of the top corner joints. Those could be thick because they wouldn't prevent the lid from working. So I let the box sit overnight to fully solidify before I messed with it and took pictures. But that's the last step. It's all done. I was so excited that it turned out, especially because I put so much work into it, and I just wanted it to be really cool and look really nice so that I could give it to my grandma for her birthday. So are you ready to see the final chocolate birthday puzzle? All right, guys, that is the second part to our happy birthday chocolate puzzle. I hope that you enjoyed watching the full process and that you learned something new. If you did, let me know by leaving me a like and a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, today's the day. If you'd like to see something else that's sweet, just click on one of these thumbnails. Thanks so much for watching today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.